Hi, I'm Nina. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Economy at King's, and the paper I'm presenting is on social preferences and social norms in distribution decisions. So the basic question we're interested in is, why do people behave unselfishly? And there's sort of two main explanations for that in the literature, one being social preferences. So it might be the case that people simply have a preference for equality or an aversion to inequality. The other one being social norms. So they might behave a certain way because they perceive that to be the norm within their group or within their society. Now, these two don't necessarily have to contradict each other, but especially for welfare economics, it's important to understand which of these can better explain behavior. Because one of the main assumptions of welfare economics is, of course, that choices reveal preferences. Now, we try to answer this question in a survey experiment, and what we do is we directly elicit a social preference and a social norm for each of our subjects, and then we run a horse race between the two to see which can better explain the choices our subjects make. And we do this in dictator-like distribution games because in those games, social norms can't function as an equilibrium device, and so the two explanations are genuine alternatives to each other. So like I said, we run a survey experiment with about 2,400 subjects. And in our experiment, our subjects take part in a quiz, and part of their performance and part of their payment is based on the relative performance within groups of 5 on that quiz. Now, each of our subjects make a dictator-like distribution decision that will determine the payoff for each of the performance levels. And we elicit preferences by asking subjects which principle of redistribution they most agree with. And we then elicit norms through incentivized Krupka and Weber elicitation. So for simplicity and to be able to compare across the different choices, we restrict all redistributive principles to these 4. So the first one being inequality aversion, then we have maximin, meritocracy, and utilitarianism. And I've written out the statements here that we give our subjects when we ask them which one they most agree with. Then each of our distribution options corresponds to one of the principles. So for inequality aversion here, the variation between the payoff levels is lowest. For maximin, the lowest performer gets the highest payoff out of all the distribution options. Meritocracy is framed in a way so that it's based on the effort exerted in the quiz. And then utilitarianism is the same as meritocracy. It just has a higher average and total payoff because we increase the payoff of the middle performer by $10. So these are our main results. The red bars are the distribution choices, the green bars are the social norms, and the blue bars are the social preferences. And we can see very clearly here that maximin is the most chosen distribution. And we can also see that most people perceive maximin to be the social norm as well. The social preference that is most often chosen, or the modal social preference, is, however, meritocracy. And so based on this, it seems that at least in the aggregate, social norms are much better at predicting distribution choices than social preferences. We also find this to be the case in our individual level models. And so our main finding is that social norms predict distribution choices significantly better than social preferences. We also have 3 different treatments. We have an impartial spectator treatment, a veil of ignorance treatment, and a treatment where subjects know where they will likely end up in the quiz. And we find that this is the same across all our treatments. Now, importantly, both can explain some variation. So, for example, if a subject holds a preference for meritocracy, then they are 2.6 times more likely to choose the meritocratic distribution. However, if they perceive meritocracy to be the norm, then they are 7.3 times more likely to choose that distribution. This is compared to everybody else. Now, in our final treatment, we're also able to test for selfishness because subjects know roughly where they will end up. And we find that this does not help consistently predict distribution choices. So to conclude, our paper provides evidence that social norms predict distribution choices better than social preferences. We also find that subjects that are more ambiguity averse are more likely to follow the social norm, and that those that are more confident in their social preference are more likely to stick with that preference in the distribution choice. We're now looking at a number of follow-up questions. So for example, the role of culture, of communication in voting, and we also look at spillovers into other decision problems like public goods games. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to receiving your questions and comments.